Tropes are very much the bread and butter of most horror movies, and in the case of the slasher genre in particular, there are few conventions more well-trod than the final girl. The final girl is the last heroine left standing, who, through their strength, smarts, cunning, and general badassery, is typically able to kill the bad guy or guys, or at least make it out alive. It's a genre staple that's persisted for decades and decades at this point, because it's just so much fun watching a plucky, resourceful female hero kick ass, take names, and live to fight another day. But just like any trope, there are those filmmakers who wish to subvert it, and so throughout the years we've occasionally seen horror movies that dare to deliver an epic, unexpected swerve and kill off the most obviously signposted final girl. On paper, these ladies all fit the final girl mold to the letter. Smart, likeable, virtuous, and conventionally attractive, yet each ended up on the mortician's slab before the end credits rolled. Now, we have already done a video covering final girls who didn't make it to the end, so be sure to check that out. But I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with 10 more horror final girls who didn't survive their movie. Number 10. Chrissy in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. Even with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning being a prequel to the 2003 remake, Chrissy had all the makings of a prototypical final girl who makes it to the end of the movie in one piece. Smarter and more likeable than basically everyone else around her, Chrissy seems destined to elude Leatherface's clutches. Yet she sadly also falls victim to him when there's barely a minute of the movie left. Chrissy escapes Leatherface and hightails it in an abandoned car, yet commits the classic horror movie sin of failing to check the back seat first. And so, just as Chrissy sees a cop and a civilian in the distance, Leatherface pops up in the back of the car and cuts Chrissy through with his trusty chainsaw. To make matters worse, this then causes Chrissy to lose control of the car, being dead and all, as it crashes into both the cop and the civilian, seemingly killing them both instantly too. The film then ends with Leatherface walking off into the night, surviving to fight another day, while the resourceful heroine everyone expected to survive is left brutally mutilated in the car. Number 9. Blair Lilly in Unfriended. 2015's innovative computer screen film Unfriended may be formally unconventional, taking place almost entirely on a laptop screen, but its protagonist Blair couldn't seem much more of a typical final girl. Blair and her friends are hanging out on Skype when they're haunted by the vengeful spirit of their dead friend Laura Barnes, who committed suicide after an embarrassing video of her went viral. Blair's pals are progressively picked off in disturbingly violent ways throughout the film until she's the only one left, and genre wisdom says she'll be the one to outsmart Laura and save her own hide. But at film's end, it's revealed that Blair was in fact the one who filmed the incriminating video and prompted Laura to kill herself, and so the final seconds of the film show Laura slamming Blair's laptop down and attacking her. We don't see Blair's death on screen, but considering what happened to the rest of her friendship group, the outcome really speaks for itself. To not only kill the final girl, but reveal an extremely unsavory facet of her past that makes her decidedly less sympathetic in the movie's final moments is quite the neat trick indeed. Number 8. Nora Price in Underwater. One of the more high-profile final girls in recent genre memory must surely be Nora Price from 2020's Underwater, as played by recent Oscar nominee and all-around internet darling Kristen Stewart. Nora is a mechanical engineer at the underwater research and drilling facility Kepler 822. And as won't surprise anyone, she ends up making a desperate last stand against Cthulhu and the Lovecraftian creatures attacking the facility. Now, technically speaking, Nora isn't the only human character left at the end of the movie. An injured Smith is jettisoned to safety in an escape pod, and when Nora realizes one of the 2 remaining pods is damaged, she forces the third survivor, Emily, to take the other working one. Once Smith and Emily are clear, it's all down to Nora and the creatures, and while the audience likely assumes that she'll find a way to survive, that's not the case at all. Indeed, Nora overloads the station's nuclear core, triggering a massive explosion which kills her along with all the creatures. Only in the film's alternate ending does Nora manage to fix the third escape pod before the station explodes, but the ending we got is certainly the more honest and gratifying of the two. Number 7. Christine Brown in Drag Me to Hell. Even though Sam Raimi's horror comedy Drag Me to Hell literally spells out what's going to happen to protagonist Christine Brown in its title, most viewers surely assumed that the likeable, embattled Christine would manage to escape the curse placed upon her, right? Wrong. After learning that she's got 3 days to try and shift the curse put on her by an elderly woman she refused a loan extension to, Christine learns she can pass the curse on by giving the button imbued with the curse to somebody else. And so Christine digs up the old woman's corpse and reburies it with the button, seemingly finally bringing her strife to an end. But alas, in the film's traumatic ending, Christine meets her boyfriend Clay at the train station, where she realises that she buried the wrong envelope with the woman, and thus still retains possession of the cursed envelope containing the button, just as the 3-day countdown elapses. And like that, Christine is dragged down into the depths of hell by a series of demonic entities, all while Clay is forced to helplessly watch. The end. Between Christine's likability and the both grotesque and painful manner of her demise, this one really stung. Number 6. Denise Willis in House of a Thousand Corpses. Trust Rob Zombie of all horror filmmakers to buck the established trend of letting the final girl get away unscathed. Or rather, not too scathed. In his wildly lurid 2003 cult fave House of a Thousand Corpses, a group of teenagers are kidnapped, tortured, and killed by an infamous clan of serial killers known as the Firefly family. After her 3 friends are systematically and brutally murdered, Denise Willis is the teen left standing and our de facto final girl. Smart and resourceful, Denise eventually manages to use her wits to evade the family and escape their compound. However, when she's picked up by a passing motorist, she fails to notice that it's the murderous patriarch of the Firefly family, Captain Spaulding, without his signature makeup. And so after Denise passes out, she wakes up strapped to an operating table and surrounded by the Firefly family. And that's all she wrote for Denise, who, if not killed by the family in the very least, lived on in agonizing pain as one of their grotesque experiments. Number 5. Christy Earl in Wolf Creek. Wolf Creek is a fascinating example because it actually kills off 2 potential final girls within mere minutes of each other in the 3rd act of the movie. Initially, audiences might assume that the headstrong British tourist Liz will defeat or escape the sadistic Aussie serial killer Mick Taylor, but roughly 20 minutes before the end, she's stabbed in the spine by Mick, paralysing her. Though we don't see Liz's death on screen, there's virtually no possibility of her making it out alive. The perspective then shifts to her pal Christy, who we assume by default is now the final girl, being the only female character left in the movie. But alas, barely 5 minutes after Liz gets taken out, Christy is shot dead by Mick while trying to escape. The perspective then shifts again to their friend Ben, who has been absent for most of the movie and yet manages to escape as the sole, ironically male, survivor. Number 4. Dana Polk in The Cabin in the Woods. The Cabin in the Woods is of course a film that thoroughly toys with the tired tropes and conventions of the horror genre itself. Case in point, Dana Polk seems to fit the mold of the prototypical final girl, with her clean-cut look, pleasant personality, and generally demure demeanour, suggesting her to be a typically moralistic, even virginal female lead. Yet, Dana parades around in her underwear near the start of the movie and has just gotten out of an illicit affair with a married professor, ensuring she's actually far from the stereotypical final girl. Late in the movie, the villainous director even attests that they had to fudge the rules of their world-saving ritual and work with what they have, re Dana's lack of virginity. And so, at film's end, Dana is given the opportunity to live if she kills her pal Marty, and completes the ritual that will keep the subterranean deities known as the Ancient Ones at bay. But Dana, infuriated at having been used as a pawn in the ritual, ultimately decides that humanity isn't worth saving at this cost, and so smokes up a joint with Marty before they're both killed along with the rest of the world by the rising Ancient Ones. For a film that so aggressively and hilariously subverted genre expectations, it was absolutely fitting that the final girl decided to let herself die and take all of humanity with her. Number 3. Amy in See No Evil 2. The Soska sisters certainly knew what they were doing when they cast legendary Scream Queen Danielle Harris, best known for playing Jamie Lloyd in the Halloween franchise, in this horror sequel. Given Harris's profile and popularity among horror fans, her character Amy is unsurprisingly set up as the final girl. And yet she ends up being dispatched by the hulking mass murderer Jacob Goodnight about 10 minutes before the end credits roll. In the climax, Amy finds herself on the run from Goodnight, and while attempting to unlock a side door, finds herself unexpectedly stabbed as Jacob shoves his blade clean through the door. Amy quickly falls to the floor and dies in the arms of her love interest Seth, who is left to fight Goodnight as the final boy, only to have his eyes gouged out by the killer a few minutes later. Jacob wins. Number 2. Anna Dantoni in Maniac. 2012's Maniac is an especially interesting instance of the final girl unexpectedly dying, because in the original movie the same character actually ends up surviving. In the 1980 version of Maniac, Anna Dantoni, the beautiful photographer preyed upon by deranged serial killer Frank Zito, manages to fend off Frank before he kills himself at film's end, though the remake's equivalent isn't quite so lucky. In the remake, it seems like Anna is again going to fight Frank off and escape to safety, but after fleeing to a passing car, the driver runs over Frank before crashing the car. As Anna hadn't yet been able to put on her seatbelt, she's promptly catapulted through the windshield and mortally wounded. In her final moments, she's comforted by Frank, who promptly scalps her and attaches said scalp to a mannequin dressed in a bridal gown in his apartment. But Frank certainly doesn't win, as he succumbs to his injuries from being run over shortly after returning home. As much as horror fans tend to view major storytelling changes in horror remakes with a fair degree of skepticism, in this case it was a savage reworking of the original story that succeeded beyond mere shock value. Number 1. Sarah in Inside. Expecting the final girl to survive is one thing, but when she's pregnant too, it's a slam dunk that she's going to make it to the end alive, right? Well, filmmakers Julian Maury and Alexandra Bustillo had other ideas for their 2007 cult classic French horror Inside, in which a young pregnant woman, Sarah, is pursued by a violent woman who wishes to take her unborn baby by any means necessary. It's reasonable to expect the pregnant woman to prevail over her deranged attacker in this instance, and indeed, in the US remake, that's precisely what happens. But in the vastly superior French original, Sarah is brutally murdered at film's end. Sarah begins giving birth amid all the chaos, and when the baby gets stuck, she reluctantly begs her attacker to do exactly what she originally intended: cut the baby out of Sarah's stomach with a pair of scissors. Sarah quickly expires from her traumatic injuries, though her baby's life is saved in the process, even if the child is seemingly set to be raised by a violent psychopath. A Pyrrhic victory if ever there was one. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed any, then do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.